Hello. My name is Katie. We're reading No Bad Parts by Richard C. Schwartz PhD, Healing Trauma and Restoring Wholeness with the Internal Family Systems Model. And we are on Chapter 7, The Self in Action. I have a little bit of a new camera set up, so we'll see how it goes. I'm going to try to not bump the table because that seems to wiggle everything, but I have my tea. Oops, see, that goes a little. Okay. Chapter 7, The Self in Action. By now you hopefully have a clear idea what the self is and what it means to be self-led. In this chapter, I want to take a closer look at how achieving self-leadership affects your life both inside and out. Developmental psychology and attachment theory have helped us understand what children need from their caretakers as they develop. IFS can be seen as attachment theory taken inside, in the sense that the client's self becomes the good attachment figure to their insecure or avoidant parts. I was initially amazed to discover that when I was able to help clients access their self, they would spontaneously begin to relate to their parts in the loving way that the textbooks on attachment theory prescribed. This was true even for people who had never had good parenting in the first place. Not only would they listen to their young exiles with loving attention and hold them patiently while they cried, they would firmly but lovingly discipline the parts in the roles of inner critics or distractors. Self just knows how to be a good inner leader. So why is this important? For one thing, if you can become what I call the primary caretaker of your own parts, then you free intimate partners or therapists, children, parents, etc., from the responsibility of taking care of raw and needy exiles. Those people then can act as the secondary caretakers of your parts, which is a much more enjoyable and feasible role. Most of us have that reversed. Our exiles don't trust ourselves, and consequently, they and the protectors who try to get them to calm down are looking outside of us to get what they need. When we encounter a person who resembles the profile exiles have of their ideal protector, redeemer, or lover, they feel elated, infatuated, and relieved. Through what's called positive transference, our parts put distorted images on such people who can't help but disappoint those extreme expectations. Then comes the negative transference from angry protectors. There are actually a number of people leading workshops on self-led parenting. When parents are self-led, they relate to their external children in the same way they do their internal ones, with patience, calm, clarity, love, firmness, and reassurance. I want to briefly revisit the particle wave view of the self I touched on in the previous chapter. When it comes to self in action, the main takeaway is applying some of those wave state experiences, spaciousness, equanimity, well-being, and interconnectedness to our day-to-day lives. With that expanded sense of awareness, we are far more likely to have compassion for others because at some level we remember that they are us. When we view other people as utterly separate, mono-minded beings, it's hard not to totalize them. We objectify them as a narcissist, a psychopath, or racist, and miss the opportunity to connect with other parts of them. When we solidify somebody in a particular way without paying attention to their inner system of exiles and protectors, it's much, much harder to keep our heart open and act toward them in an effective way. At the time of this writing, our President Donald Trump is an example of that for me. Some of my protectors can totalize him and see him as one of those diagnostic categories. And if I had the opportunity to meet him, my goal would likely be to shame him into changing, which, because of the way he reacts to attempts to shame him, would totally backfire. But I could do something different entirely. And if instead I adopted the perspective of multiplicity inherent in IFS, then I could see behind his protectors and know that they're just trying to keep him safe and make him feel better. They themselves are trying to deal with the exiles in him that make him feel so worthless, and no doubt they are all stuck in horrible places in his childhood. This different approach is like good parenting too. I can have compassion for the man while still feeling upset at the damage his protectors are doing and working to stop them. For a few years now, I've been training social activists to lead from self. In my experience, many people are called to become activists because they were badly hurt in the past, carry lots of exiles, and consequently have protectors who don't want anyone else to suffer the way they did. As a result, their activism is sometimes protector-led, which can further polarize issues and alienate potential allies. That's certainly understandable, but I think we can do better. As Charles Eisenstein observes, we see again and again within environmental organizations, within leftist political groups, the same bullying of underlings, the same power grabs, the same egoic rivalries as we see everywhere else. If these are played out in our organizations, how can we hope that they won't be played out in the world we create, should we be victorious? This goes for me as well. Although we aspire to be self-led at the IFS Institute, we certainly have our own blind spots, and since I'm the leader, many of them reflect my own burdened parts. My growing awareness of this dynamic has inspired me to commit to steadily working on myself, as do the members of my training and administrative staff. Session 3, Ethan and Sarah. I include this next transcript because it illustrates work with social activists. It also clearly demonstrates many aspects of IFS related to spirituality and the self, which we have only talked about so far. Ethan and Sarah Hughes, their real names, excuse me, are leaders in the Living Off the Grid movement. They embrace a very simple life on a small homestead, living without electricity, using candles by night. They cook and heat their home with a wood stove, keep food cool in a root cellar, and travel via bicycle and public transportation instead of car. They deliberately live below the poverty line so as to not have to pay income tax, or as Ethan puts it, war tax. They welcome over 1,500 visitors per year who come to get inspired and learn how they do it. In this way, Ethan and Sarah are modeling how it's possible to step away from the frantic, driven pace of our lives and access other parts of ourselves. When people stay with the Hughes family, they are often amazed at how quickly they come to enjoy this sustainable lifestyle that respects and keeps them connected to the earth. Ethan and Sarah have been learning about IFS but hadn't tried it yet. This was my first encounter with them. Let's see. Okay, so we have Dick, we have Ethan and Sarah. I think I'm going to do Ethan and Sarah, okay? If I can remember. Ethan. I think one of the issues that recurs is that this part that I call the destroyer of injustice will attack anything, including Sarah, that it perceives to be supporting white supremacy or classism. An example is that we live as a family of 4 in a house of 500 square feet and Sarah wants an addition. I tell her we've got to live smaller and there's homeless people, but it comes out in a way that creates a lot of disharmony or far worse. Dick, and how often would you say that comes out? Ethan, we almost separated 2 years ago and since then I pulled it back a lot. Sarah, yes, we've both pulled back, and when it happens, we don't talk about it, but the IFS framework is super helpful for us to understand what is happening. We didn't have that tool before. So Sarah, when you sniff the presence of that part of Ethan, what happens inside of you? Sarah, I have some anger that comes up, but that hasn't been safe for me, so I have to silence it. There's a silencer part. So I have this silent anger, and I've also had a dissociative part that can pull me away or help me forget about the conflict so I can open up to him again. Because I have a really tender heart and I like to be open. So when his destroyer part comes out, I then go, makes gasping sound, like that. I clamp up in my throat. Okay, well, you guys are well ahead of the game in that you already know who the inner players are. So, Ethan, you've got this destroyer of injustice. When Sarah reacts to it like that, what happens inside of you? I feel really sad because it feels like this part of me has no space, so I start to think that I shouldn't be with Sarah, that she's too tender-hearted for this fiery warrior. I feel like I'm hurting someone I love so much, so I have to shut it out. You feel like you shouldn't be with Sarah because you see the damage it does, and you don't want to keep inflicting that. But I also don't want to shut it down. You want that part to have space. So it's been a dance, sometimes a brawl. I want to say I'm sorry. Okay, let's do that. Let's see what kind of repair we can do right now. Are you open to that, Sarah? She nods. Go ahead, Ethan. Ethan, sobbing. That's good. Stay with the sadness. That's great. Still sobbing. What's coming up is that I know how much you love the world, how much you cry because the monarchs are dying. You cried when the tree frog got extinct. I'm so sorry. There's like these two sides of this part. It's trying to protect the world for you and then hurting you. This all feels so sacred, and I've been trying for so many years. That's great. Let me pause you for a little bit. Sarah, how was it to hear that? I felt especially touched when you said that you want to protect me because you know I love everything so much. So you get it that that's the intention of that part. Yeah, I know that part. It has sometimes been damaging, but it's also one of the reasons I love him. So my inclination is to do a piece of work with that destroyer part. Are you up for that, Ethan? Yeah. So while we do this, it's important that you, Sarah, stay in self. Okay, are you ready? Yeah. So find that guy in or around your body, the destroyer of injustice. Where do you feel him? Right here. And as you notice him, how do you feel toward him? I'm both grateful and afraid. Let's get the one who's afraid to give us the space to get to know him. That part can go into a separate room. It doesn't need to be a part of this. It can trust you and me to help the destroyer part. Yeah. Is it okay to ask the sacred part to step aside and witness? Yes, totally. Now, how do you feel toward this guy? What's coming up is that I want it to have a place of power in the world that needs it, but in a way that doesn't put people off or scare them. That's right. Let him know that that's your intention and that you do value him and feel gratitude toward him, and just see how he reacts. He doesn't fully believe me because I've shut him down so many times. Yeah, so let's let him know that you can understand that it's hard for him to trust what you're saying because you did shut him down. That makes sense, doesn't it? That he would have trouble trusting you. Yeah. So we're just going to work on repairing your relationship with him in a similar way to which we just did with Sarah. See what he needs to start to trust you again. He's saying he's committed to keeping me from falling asleep. He needs to trust that I'm remembering to stay connected to real justice for all life. Okay, so what do you say to him about all that? I think he's right, but I have been isolated so often by his choices that have been driven by love, but then trigger people. My attempts just bring up other parts in other people. He's right that there are other parts that want to go to sleep for a while, that are scared of not belonging. So we have that polarization happening inside. All right, so let it know that there are those parts that aren't thrilled that he can do that to people, so you can understand why it's hard for him to trust you. Sobbing. He's saying how much he knows that I love the ocean, and he doesn't want me to have to explain to my daughters why there aren't any fish left in the ocean. Yeah, so just let him know that we get how much he cares and how much he really, really wants things to change. and improve. How committed he is to that. How we really admire him. How is he doing? How's he reacting? He's feeling excited that he could come out, and he says he's excited to work with me. Good, that's exactly what we're trying to do, to make it so that he doesn't have to take over all the time and instead can work with you and maybe have you speak for him and see if that sounds okay to him. Yeah, he's seeing ripples of potential from that. He keeps coming up in images and he's saying, what the fuck are we doing? Let's all go cook so that the cooking staff in this retreat center that are mainly marginalized people of color can come in and get this work. It's hard for him to even indulge in this. Ask him, Ethan, if he protects other parts of you, if he's willing to disclose that. There's a part that just cries, curled up in a ball all day, and doesn't even move. Yeah, so ask him if we could go to that part and heal it so it wasn't feeling that anymore and it felt good. Would he be able to relax a little more? We're not asking him to change his role at all. We're asking if he'd be willing to relax a little more and trust you to speak for him. He's just saying that the last time I got close to that part, I cried for a month, for 4 hours a night, and he says there is no room for me crying when everything is dying. So tell him if he gives us permission, that's not going to be the outcome. Instead, we're going to go to that guy without being overwhelmed by him, and we're going to get him out of where he's stuck back there. We're going to unload a lot of the sadness that he carries. See how that appeals to this destroyer guy. He's okay to try it. We really appreciate that. And before we go there, see if there are any other parts that are afraid to let us go to that guy. The other parts seem excited. Good, that's great. Are you ready? Yeah. So focus on that guy curled in the ball. Find him in your body or around your body. And how do you feel toward him as you notice him there? I'm so sorry he has to come into a world like this. That's right. So let him know that the world is so bad, that he had no choice about it, and see how he reacts to your compassion. He looked up for a moment out of the ball. Good. And how close are you to him in terms of feet away? About 5 feet. Okay, good. So right now, we're just going to extend this compassion to him until he starts to trust that he's not alone anymore, that you're there. He says he can't go on without his dad. Without his dad. So let him know we get how much he needs his dad. Just let him know that you get that, but also if it feels sincere, if it feels right, let him know that you can be a dad to him if he likes that. He stopped crying. Good. You still about 5 feet away? I'm kneeling down a little closer. Good, that's really good. So we're just going to keep going this way until he trusts you as someone who can take care of him like a dad. I'm holding him now. Good, how is he reacting? He's crying again a little bit. Let him know it's fine to cry while you hold him. Is it okay to feel some of his feelings right now? Ethan sobbing, yes. That's really great. Let him know you get that he carries an enormous amount of sadness. He's hugging me so tight. He's hugging you so tight? Yeah. That's great. Are you ready to ask him what he needs you to know about what happened to him? Yes. So ask him to really let you feel and see and sense so that you can feel all the sadness and how bad it was. He feels so misunderstood. Feels so misunderstood by you or by other people. Other people. Yeah, so tell him to show that to you. What happened to make him feel so misunderstood? Sobbing. He says, why is everyone drinking and driving and killing people? He says it's so fucked up. Yeah, that is fucked up. Let him know that it's a really good question. He says his mom and brother didn't understand. He says his mom and brother didn't understand. Didn't understand him or what? He's saying how fucked up it is that people do that. His father was hit by a drunk driver. Yeah, I was guessing that. And how old was this boy, Ethan? 13. Yeah, okay, all right. So tell him to go on. This is really good. That he can let you see and sense and feel all of that. Just tell him to keep going, whatever he needs you to get. I'm just sad that no one could teach me how to be with him. Yeah, so tell him you're really sorry that you haven't been able to be with him in this way all these years. Let him know you're sorry that he kind of had to be locked up in there. He's relaxing in there a little bit. That's great. He's 13, but he's small. Yeah, ask if you get it now how bad it was for him, if there's more. He's saying how hard it was to go to public school, sobbing. That after the devastation, everyone was talking about what they're wearing. The teachers didn't even talk to him. Teachers didn't talk to him. Like nothing happened. It's like he was in fucking prison. That's right. He hated going to the fucking mall. So let him know you're getting all this too. There's one more piece where there's a part of him that felt like he's partly responsible for the accident. Yeah. Ask him why. Because his dad asked him to go to the basketball game the night he was hit. He chose to go to the arcade with some other people. So if he had gone with the dad, the accident would have happened, or what? What's the logic there? All that I'm hearing is that superficiality kills. Got it, okay. Does this make sense that he would believe that? Nods in agreement. Let him know that you get that. So he's been anti-superficiality ever since. That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. So Ethan, what do you say to him about whether it was his fault? I tell him it wasn't. Yeah, we need to stay with that until he starts to believe it. How's he reacting to you saying that? He's apologizing that he got caught up in the superficiality of the culture. He's apologizing. I'm not quite following that. That's what came up. He's sorry that he got caught up in that. It was the first time my dad had invited me. He was the middle school basketball coach, and it was the first time he had invited me to come to a game. He chose the superficial thing instead. Yeah, he wanted me to go to the game, and other people were saying, let's go to the arcade instead, and I got caught up in the culture. Yeah, so let him know that you get that. Let him know you get why he feels so guilty about that. How's he doing now? He's calm again. Good. Just see if he feels like you get everything he wants you to get. Nodding. He's nodding yes. Okay, good. So Ethan, I want you to go back into that time period and be with him the way he needed somebody, and tell me when you're done with him, when you're there with him. I see myself stepping in front of the bed and he's crying, so there's someone else that's there and I'm watching him. You see yourself there? So ask that part that's trying to do it for you to let you do it, such that you don't see yourself, you're just there with him. Just tell me when you're in there with him. Okay. How are you being with him? He's crying a bit and I have my hands on his feet. Perfect. Stay with him that way. Pause, breathing. Can he tell that you're there? Yeah. Is he glad? Yeah. Okay, good. Now ask if there's something he wants you to do with him or for him before we take him to a good, safe place. He just wants me to hold him. Go ahead and hold him. And he wants me to tell him that it's going to be okay. Okay, go ahead and do both of those things. Pause, sniffling. It's switching between me holding him and me watching me holding him. So that guy, just be firm with him. We get he's trying to help. Just let him know you don't need that you can handle this. Okay. How's he doing with you now? He says he doesn't want to be alone. Good. Ask him if there's anything else he wants you to do with him or for him back there before we take him to a good place. Did he need you to talk to the family for him? He's just saying that he's asking where my mom is, that he's all alone and it's late. Yeah, does he want you to get her or does he want you to explain it? Yeah, I'm telling him right now because Mom wasn't there very much and she had to work. Okay. He's asking why the neighbors didn't come by. What are you saying? They have their own challenges. Let him know that he should have had somebody that he deserved to. And what he has, and that he has you now. He's smiling for the first time. Okay, great. Just see if he's ready now and we'll go someplace he'll like. Yeah. So where would he like to go? It could be the present or it could be a fantasy place. He wants to swim in the ocean. Good, let's take him to the ocean. And before he swims though, tell him he never has to go back there and that you're going to be taking care of him. And ask him if he's ready to unload the feelings and beliefs he got back then. He's just asking. He's saying he wants a lot of turtles and seaweed and dolphins. He wants the ocean as it was before. Okay, so let's set that up for him. He's happy to see so much life. That's great. And then ask him again if he's ready to unload this stuff. Yeah. Where does he carry it in his body? In or around his body? Back of his head. What would he like to give it up to? Light, water, fire, wind, earth, or anything else? Water. Yeah, so tell him that all out of the back of his head, to let that all out of the back of his head and let the ocean take it. He lets some of it go, but some of it he doesn't want to forget. Okay, so he wants to hold on to the memories? He said he could put them in a canoe. So he'll put them in a canoe. Let's do that. Let's put it out of the back of his head and into the canoe. He realizes there's more in his heart and in his stomach. Yeah, let's get that out too. No need to carry any of this stuff anymore. He's floating. That's great, that's great. He's pushing the canoe away. That's great, great. How's he feeling now? He's smiling and not crying. Oops. He's smiling and not crying, but still feeling some sadness. And is this sadness something he wants to unload or something he wants to express to you? He wants to unload it. Okay, to the ocean also, or the canoe? To the ocean. He wants my dad. Ethan, there is one thing we could do with that. You can invite your dad's spirit to come, and he may or may not come, but you can see if he wants to invite your dad's spirit to come. He does. Okay, so tell him to do it, and we'll see if your dad's spirit shows up. He's here. That's good. That's great. And let's just see if there's something he wants this boy to know, if the boy wants to ask him anything. He's smiling and the boy is just so happy to see him. He's in a rowboat and he's just smiling. Oh, this book gets me. Good. So does the boy want to give him that sadness, or what does the boy want to do with that sadness? The boy is asking my dad if he gives him that sadness, will he lose the connection? And what does your dad say? He says, I'm right here all the time. Yeah, and how's that for the boy to hear? He climbed into the rowboat with my dad, sobbing. He likes being held by my dad. Great, really, really good. He's now put a hand out and he's calling me. Good. He's calling me over. Yeah, so you can come over there too. Sobbing and breathing deeply. I'm holding the boy now. My dad is watching and he's smiling. Good, Ethan. Let's invite the original guy, the destroyer of injustice, to come in and see this boy. See how he reacts. There are more parts there and they're happy to see him. That's great. One of them is dancing, breathing. The destroyer isn't dancing, but he's kind of smiling and nodding. His arms are crossed. Laughter. Good. I think he's a little impatient. I get that to him, what we're doing is indulgent. He's kind of smiling and laughing with me now. You can ask him if he'd like to unload anything that he carries that doesn't belong to him. Yeah, a burden. Where does he carry it on his body, in his body? Neck and back. Do you know what it is? That protecting life is up to him. Yeah, that's right. What would you like to give it up to? I saw an image of a huge mountain, like half mountain, half woman. Tell him to give up what it is in his neck and back to this mountain woman. He's kneeling down and putting it down like a sacred sword. Good. He's looking up just to make sure it's the right thing to do for her. What does she say? It's nonverbal, but it's a yes. Good. He wants to grab the sword, but he really wants me to know that he wants to be doing something for light. Yeah, let him know you guys can figure that out, that you may not need to do it now. How does he feel without the sword? A lot lighter, but he wants purpose. Like, what am I going to do? Yeah, wanting to hold something. In the absence of a sword, Ethan, tell him he can invite whatever he wants inside his body, including purpose, and just see if something comes in. Goddess Mountain gives a ball of light that he is holding. Good, that's great. How's he like holding that ball of light? It's glowing. Good, that's great. He's smiling. He doesn't want it to stop. Yeah, so tell him it doesn't have to stop. He can just hold it. Does that feel complete for now? I guess, laughing. I'd just like to connect with you, to Sarah, somehow. Feel free. Do you want me to come to you? It would be great if you could sit on my lap. Stopping. Sits on his lap, stroking his head. Okay, I need a tissue. Be right back. Okay. Whew. This session illustrates many of the ideas and processes we've been talking about so far, as well as some phenomena we haven't explored yet. Let me start by issuing 2 caveats. First, not all sessions go so well. Ethan and Sarah had a head start in that they'd been playing with IFS for some time, had gotten to know key parts, and were both taking responsibility for their own role in this conflict. Also, Ethan's parts already trusted his self enough to step back when he'd asked them to, and that's often not the case initially. Second, I encouraged Ethan to go to his exile, the crying boy curled in a ball. And as I've stressed before, I encourage you not to do that without help. I include this session here just to let you know what's possible, not to model what you should be doing. Here's a reflection Ethan shared with me later on. From the moment the unburdening occurred, I noticed a greater spaciousness in my being when issues of justice presented themselves. The fire for justice and the end of suffering still burned fiercely, but that fire was shared with others instead of burning against others. The shift was one of power over. I see injustice and you don't see it, and now I will show you. To power with. I see injustice and you do not see it. Now I will be gentle and curious with you to help you see it or discern together if injustice is actually occurring. I have become more effective in navigating these situations because of the openness. It feels like before the unburdening, my fire for justice was in a small room and people got dragged into the room and were very uncomfortable, hot, burned, suffocated. And now, after unburdening, the fire is outside and expansiveness and vastness around it. People are invited to sit by the fire. It becomes a life-giving campfire and people can freely choose the distance from the fire they need to be comfortable. I can see clearly that this is what myself wants. Upon returning home, the energetic field around my body was shifted due to the unburdening. Now people and opportunities were drawn into my life, such as working with Indigenous women to form a community and being invited to more deeply support the queer and trans community in Maine. My energy around justice work is now more grounded and clean, which I believe the people from oppressed positions and communities could sense. Because so much happened in this session, I want to highlight a few aspects. The beginning illustrates how IFS couple therapy often goes. We ask about the parts of each partner that get into it with the other, and when it's clear that transforming one partner's part will produce a big change, we ask to start with that one. If it were ongoing couples therapy, we would likely work with Sarah's parts in the next session. Our transition to working with Ethan's destroyer of injustice illustrates many things I covered in the previous pages, namely that this is the kind of protector I find dominating many social activists. It's crucial to ask protectors permission to heal when they protect, that is, by honoring their work and without expecting or asking them to change. We reassure parts that it's safe to let us go to those places. There are certain steps to healing in exile. In this case, having Ethan's self form a trusting friend relationship with the 13-year-old boy, witness what happened to him in the past time and the burdens he accrued, for example, his beliefs about his responsibility and hatred of superficiality, retrieve the boy from the past and help him unburden, and then bring in the protectors so they see they don't have to do their jobs anymore. And then there's the more spiritual aspects I hinted at, here involving the spirit of Ethan's dad. In my work, I've had many experiences with clients in which the image of a dead relative comes spontaneously at a moment like the one Ethan experienced, and that presence has a salubrious effect. I've learned to ask clients if they're interested in inviting such a visit if they've accessed a lot of self and it feels like it might be helpful. Most of the time, the figure's image does arrive like this, and unlike when they were alive, they seem to be quite unburdened and in self, as was the case with Ethan's father. What is this phenomenon? Is it the client's imagination or another part playing the role of the dead father, or is it actually the father's spirit? I don't pretend to know the answer. I'm an empiricist in the sense that I endeavor to study these phenomena without presumption. My father was a good scientist, and one of his most important messages to me was to follow the data even if it takes you far outside your paradigm. This IFS adventure has done that over and over, and the experiences in which dead relatives show up illustrates that. I'm also a pragmatic, so if these visits seem to help, I go with it. In my experience, this phenomenon seems to help clients a great deal. Later in the session, as Ethan goes to unburden his protector, he spontaneously sees an image of a being that's half mountain, half woman, a figure he calls a mountain goddess. She gives the protector a ball of light when he asks for purpose. What is this? This is another phenomenon that occurs spontaneously in many clients. At crucial points, what people refer to as guides will come and help them. I don't pretend to know what this is all about either. That is some of the adventure of this work. You never know what you and your clients will encounter in their inner world. The key is to stay curious and to see if whatever comes seems to be helping or not. I want to add that these seemingly mystical experiences don't only happen in people who already believe in such things. I've worked with total atheists and clients whose religious beliefs preclude such things, and many of them at first react with anger or fear. I sometimes think about the people referred to as shamans, people who regularly work with ancestral spirits as well as entities comparable to Ethan's mountain goddess. Some believe that an alternative universe or realm exists that we can access with various practices: drumming, chanting, dance, prayer, ingesting hallucinogenic plants, hyperventilation, sleep deprivation, dreaming, fasting, rituals, and so on. Could it be that by simply focusing on our parts, we can enter the same realm? Becoming self-led. Ideally, Ethan's destroyer of injustice will feel less compelled to take over in the angry and judgmental way it had before. Instead, it will trust Ethan's self to speak and act for it, and take on more of an advisor role. It will retain its passion for justice and love for people and the earth, but will rely on Ethan's courage, clarity, confidence, compassion, and so on to effectively express its beliefs and pursue its goals. In addition to those 8 C words describing the self, I've also identified 5 that begin with a P: patience, persistence, presence, perspective, and playfulness. Self-led social activists are able to draw upon these qualities as well, because the self can maintain a long-range perspective. You can be patiently persistent in your efforts without the highly attached urgency that tends to polarize. With the IFS perspective, you also avoid the mono-mind thinking that makes people pigeonhole each other, and instead you can see past your opponent's protectors to the exiles that drive their extremes and have compassion for them. When you are present in self, you can be highly forceful without escalating conflicts because the other doesn't feel denigrated. Leading from self amid conflict becomes a goal unto itself. For example, when I have a fight with my wife, I ask my parts to step back and let me stay to relate to her, and not simply to get her to calm down and be nicer, although it often has that impact. Instead, I do this to further convince my parts that I can lead my system. So the goal becomes trying to maintain the presence of self regardless of how the other is behaving. To do this, it helps when your parts come to realize that you are not a child anymore, and that as yourself you possess powerful qualities and can be forcefully assertive when necessary. Often protectors look down on some of these qualities. For example, they think that you're a mushy bundle of passive compassion with porous boundaries who will give away the farm, or that you are too innocent, trusting, or scared to take care of them. They only know you as you are when you blend with those other parts. It's often shocking to your protectors to discover that you are able to separate them from those parts, and they learn that you have agency and can protect your system so they don't have to. This is quite a challenge in some circumstances. When you face threatening people or events, for example, and yet amid the terror of the rage, the self is in each of us is always there. The I in the storm, I is in capital I. The calm beneath the rolling waves. There is always self, no matter how triggered and extreme our parts. If we can get them to separate enough, we'll have access to at least some of the qualities of self, and we'll be able to be with our fear and anger rather than blend with it. I'm reminded of an episode in my life several years ago when my wife Jeanne, G-E-A-N-N-E, and I were visiting my brother and sister-in-law at their place in Hawaii. It was a day of very high surf, and despite Jean's warnings, I decided to wade into the shallows, assuming I was safe if the water didn't get past my thighs. I unknowingly took a step off a drop-off and was suddenly in the middle of a riptide, pulling me quickly out to sea. Not knowing any better, I tried to swim directly back to shore and got nowhere. I tried to rest by rolling on my back, but the waves washed into my mouth and I started choking. As I became increasingly fatigued, it began to dawn on me that I might not make it. Parts of me began screaming repeatedly in my head, "We're going to die." I was able to separate from them enough to let them feel me saying, "We might die, but I'll be with you as we do." And I sensed them calm down. Just when I was ready to give up, my sister-in-law arrived at the beach, saw me struggling, and pointed frantically for me to swim horizontally toward the huge waves. It was counterintuitive, but exactly what I needed to do to get back to shore. With no energy to spare, I gave it one last go, and I was eventually carried in by the waves. I learned later that a man had drowned in that same spot days earlier, so I felt extremely lucky. The point of sharing this story is that even in the face of real danger, it's possible to hold your parts. Sure, it's difficult. I've had years of experience showing my parts that things go better when they separate and let me handle things, so they trusted me enough to do that. But any measure of self-leadership is helpful in dire circumstances. It may not lead to the kind of life-saving luck I had, but it's always better to face your challenges from a place of calm, courage, clarity, and confidence, rather than from scared, dissociating, or impulsive parts. The more self we bring to the crises we encounter, for example, the current pandemic, the more likely its lessons will be learned at all levels, planetary, national, and individual. Whew. Okay, that was the end of chapter 7. I think I need a nap after reading that. What a roller coaster ride. Man. I think I'm reacting so strongly to that last bit about the ocean because when I was, how old was I? I think I was about 8. I had a similar thing happen where I was in the ocean, up in Maine, I think, or yeah. I was in the ocean with a friend who was only like 4 or 5 at the time, and we were just up to our thighs, basically our knees, and our parents were all right there, and yet water is water, and it wasn't a riptide, it was just like an undercurrent that kind of pulled the sand out from under our feet, and we both flipped underwater, did a somersault, and I clearly remember that moment of, oh my God, we're drowning. Like, this is what drowning is. And I was enough of a swimmer at the time to know I'd watched kids get pulled out of the pool by lifeguards, and was like, this is the part where the lifeguard needs to come and swoop us out. And I had this very calm voice show up and go, relax. You need to let go, loosen your body. And then as soon as that happened, we, I guess, found earth, and I had this burst of energy, and we hauled ourselves up onto shore, and everything was okay. But yeah, that's just so tender that even as he knows he could be dying, like he's drowning, he still has that self-leadership to say, I've got you, you're safe. That's the goal. I think death is one of the scariest things for humans to grapple with. And so the idea that you could be almost like you think you're on your deathbed and you could still hold space for yourself is pretty amazing. Okay, I'm gonna go drink my tea and take some deep breaths and probably watercolor, because I need something to like, that was heavy. Both Ethan's story and Dick's story were both very heavy in a loving, joyful sort of way, but I'm ready to come out of my head, play, breathe, be curious again, and I really appreciate you joining me. This has been so fun. I don't think I've ever cried so much reading. I mean, I've cried reading books, but not like nonfiction books so much. And I don't think I've ever cried so much and filmed it, but I also feel like this is, sometimes crying in front of other people can be triggering to them, and sometimes it can be a good demonstration of how to be with your feelings, because it wouldn't really make sense for me to not have any emotional reactions while reading this, since it's highly impactful writing. And I think that speaks to, first of all, just the fact that I'm a pretty emotional being, but also that this work is really impactful and feels resonant for me. And so it's evoking the emotions that are tied to my stories that I hold around similar pieces of my life. And that's really how I just discern what feels valuable and important to me is, does this actually resonate? Does it mean something to me? And if it does mean something, what am I going to do with that? And so I'm excited. I've already been integrating this into my work as I've been reading this book. And I'm not a certified IFS therapist. I'm a coach, but I think you can tell which are the really, really big traumas that need more support and which are like slight parts work that can be done with anyone who you trust and feel safe with. So I have been incorporating that into my client work with less intense situations, and it's been really impactful just to see the sense of relief and liberation that comes from touching base with parts of us that have been exiled and bringing them back into their power and their autonomy so that they feel seen and loved and integrated into wholeness. It's really special. So I'm planning on doing more of this work. We still have a few more chapters left, and I hope you enjoy it. Keep on listening if it resonates, and if it's too intense, take care of yourself. I trust you to do what's best for you. Okay, I think those are all my words. Be well. Talk to you soon. Bye.